We shared on Instagram recently that we soak our chicken grain before we feed it to the chickens, and that it has drastically reduced the amount of feed that we go through. And a lot of people messaged me asking for advice on how to do that. And so Bella and I are going to sit and chat with you a little bit today about chicken feed.
One of the reasons I like soaking and mixing our own grain is because we know exactly what's in it. We have 4 ingredients in our chicken feed, and that's all. It's wheat, barley, oats, and corn.
Part of the reason that we can afford to buy organic for the chickens is because we're going through less than we used to before we started soaking. So why do we soak? It is easier for the chickens to digest. It's easier for anybody to digest grain when it's been soaked, even humans.
And this does not work for pellets, crumbles, or like fake whole grains, like anything that has a bunch of preservatives or anything mixed in. It has to be pure whole grains, and it can't be anything added in.
So tell us the process. Bella kind of oversees it for the boys, but the boys do the work of the actual moving the grain over and the soaking.
I gave the soaking to them because they said that they enjoyed it. So I said, hey, that's one less thing I have to do.
This is the chicken soaking station. It's nothing fancy. It's buckets.
But you gotta make sure that your buckets are clean. You can't use...
That's right. So you can see on the top they're marked 1, 2, and 3.
I really need to redo this.
It's faded.
Yeah, it's very faded.
So for the soaking process, we put grain in the bucket and you add water.
Yeah, fill it up. Fill it about 1 to 2 inches with water above the grain line, and then you put a lid on it. Unless it, because like then it will keep the mice and stuff out. Right. But you need to make sure you leave it open, because actually the boys like closed one of the lids, and the lid was starting to bubble because it needs oxygen.
It needs some oxygen. So then it sits for 24 hours.
It sits for 24 hours. That's how you start the 1-day soaking. The 3-day soaking, you start 3 buckets of grain. You have 3 buckets. You fill them up with the amount of grain, like an average amount you think. Then you put about 1 to 2 inches in each of them, and you put lids on them. And I like to number my lids 1, 2, and 3, because then you don't get confused. Because believe me, it's so hard to tell. Once it's like the 2 and 3, you can't tell anymore. They look the same. After that, you let them sit for 24 hours, and then after the 24 hours. You feed your bucket that says 3. We leave the water in. Since we don't feed in pans, we feed on the ground. It doesn't matter if there's water in it. If you were feeding in pans, you might want to strain it, or if you're feeding in the coop, you don't want a bunch of water in there. So then we feed it, and we take the number 3 bucket and we move it back to the number 1 bucket, and take the number 2 bucket and put the number 3 lid on it. It's really hard to explain.
Shift everything over.
Yeah, it moves once. So your 3 gets fed. Then your 2 bucket goes where the 3 was, and that gets a 3 lid. Your 1 bucket goes where your 2 bucket was, and it gets a 2 lid. And then your 3 bucket goes back and start, and it gets a 1 lid.
And it gets new grain and new water.
New grain, new water, and it starts what you started to begin with. And then for your number 2 and 1, you want to rinse it, because if you don't rinse your grain, it can end up getting moldy. Rinse it like in a strainer or whatever, until it stops smelling.
Right, so once you get this system going, your chickens will always get food that has been soaked, rinsed. So the boys aren't here right now, but we're going to show you. They'll be surprised that you did their job for them tonight. You take bucket number 3, and you feed your birds.
And you spread it out so they don't fight. The first stuff is pretty liquidy though. So this is my strainer, because it had a few holes in it, so I just drilled a few more holes, because I couldn't use a regular strainer because we had so many chickens. So
that's right. If you just had a small amount of chickens, a little kitchen strainer would be fine.
Take your day 2 or 1, whichever, it doesn't matter. This is day 2, so we're dumping day 2 in here. And there is where you drop a few, right? You drop a few grains. That's the
Don't worry,
chickens
the
get
chickens will get it tomorrow.
So, then you can see that grain. It looks really pretty. You take your water, and you're gonna rinse your grain. And I kind of use my hands to move around to make sure it smells good and it's getting really fresh. So you can see already, it just looks like the water, you know, it's already pretty fresh. Alright, so there we go. Once you rinse your grain, you smell it to make sure it smells fresh, and then you take the rinse your buckets out. You rinse your bucket out, and every like probably week or 2 weeks, I like to like actually like kind of scrub it out, you know, because it gets kind of like a little dirty after the end. And then you take your hose and you get anything left in the strainer. There we go. Now, after you've done that, you fill your bucket back up with water. I like to get all the edges. There we go, about 1 to 2 inches. So that's enough. And now this turns into your tomorrow feed.
Bucket number 2
it
now
looks
becomes
really pretty.
bucket number 3.
So you move it over to your 3 spot, and you take your 2 bucket. You're gonna move that over. There's your 1. So you take your.
This is the bucket that she just fed to the chickens. It was here, fed it to the chickens. It gets moved back around here, and everything shifts down a spot.
Yeah, and this is the day 2. All right, you dump it back. Dump it in. All right, we're gonna rinse our buckets out just a little bit. Go, and now we rinse our grain. Next, you fill your. Go 1 to 2 inches, rinse your thing out. Last part of this 3-day soaking, or soaking in general, is soaking new feed for 3 days from now. Which, also, it's nice, like, worst case scenario, like, we were once, like, man, oh no, we forgot to soak, that's okay. We just went ahead and fed number 2, even though it's number 2, and we just added 2 soaked 2. This is the scooper that we use. We use a coffee can, so we measure everything by a coffee can. The meat birds get about that much, and the chickens get a full plus 1 line right here. So a full plus a line is what the chickens get. So then imagine that's meat birds get half a can. So that's 1 and probably about 3/4 is for all of our night birds. So that's not that much. Okay, now we take our grain, we dump 1 scoop. And this took me a while to figure out the amount.
So it'll be trial and error for you to get to this point. Whatever you're currently feeding your chickens, you're going to be able to probably cut that in half right away, and then you can experiment from there. This is the difference between the soaked and the non-soaked. So
you can tell the little skinny stuff is that fat right there. But it looks very different.
So much tastier, doesn't it? The book that you read, what did she say? Because I know our situation is a little different, but what did she say that you could reduce the food consumption by? Do you remember?
Well, her mixture was a little bit different, so she did have a little bit more. Like, she added sunflower seeds and peas and kelp and, there's like a whole list. She has probably like twice as much as we do in ours, so but it's probably about equal because she doesn't free range her chickens, so that is also probably about equal. But she said that using whole grains in a whole grain mixture, which you have to use whole grains to like, it kind of, all whole grains kind of like equal out, like all whole grain's a whole grain, like depending on if you use a different whole grain or not, it's all the same, so you can feed about
the same amount of bulk.
Yeah, like it's the same amount of consumption. It's not like eating potato chips or like rice, you know, it's like,
right.
It's all the same thing. But she said that soaking it for 3 days reduced up to 75% less for her, and she wasn't even free ranging.
What she'd have to feed her chickens.
Yeah.
That's a huge amount, and that's really what kind of got us started.
Which I think we're reducing it more, because on top of soaking it and on top of giving them very good grains, and we're rinsing it every day so it's more fresh, they consume less because it's better quality. Our chickens get like full free range, like they can go wherever they want, and they consume like all sorts of things. They'll eat, like, I'll find snakes and bugs and lizards and toads and like worms and all of the insects that they can find, and that's gonna like be a bulk of their diet along with grass.
And they scratch through the
the cow manure. because we feed our cow grain. So then a little bit of the grain like passes through and doesn't get digested, and so they'll eat that. But that's only a very small part of it.
But they're out scrounging all day long. And also, we feed our chickens at night.
Yeah, that's another thing. If you feed your chickens in the morning, they'll be really, really hungry. You'll feed them, and then they'll be full. And they're not as likely to go out and actually find bugs because they're not hungry. So ours in the morning, from morning until about 7, are pretty hungry. Which they're not, like, really hungry because obviously they have the resources.
They ate the night before, yeah.
Yeah, they ate the night before, and they have the resources to, like, fill themselves. So then they're more dedicated. Right now, all of our chickens are right out around us, eating the bugs and eating the grass. And we feed them at 7. A lot of people would ask, like, okay, how do you know your chickens aren't starving? Because, you know, that's how some people can feed less, is they're just not getting enough. But when I feed, I generally like to feed at 7, so that gives them about an hour and a half to, like, 2 hours to eat the food.
Right, before dark.
Before dark. And then if they leave any, that means they are totally full. Like, our chickens, I probably need to reduce the feed a little bit because they're leaving a little bit more than I would like. Like, I like
snack on it the next day.
I know, they do eat it in the morning, but I like them to leave just a little bit of the not favorite grain. And then that tells me, okay, they'll eat that grain. It's not their favorite, but I know they're getting enough.
So soaking grain is a lot easier than it seems, especially once you get going in the routine of it. But if you have any questions, go ahead and leave them in the comments, and we'll put Bella on it. See if she can answer them for you.